One of my favorite cult of that time was a movie called It's Alive, directed by Larry Cohen. What can you tell us about that experience? You built the child monster.
Yes, I'd actually done one day shooting for Larry Cohen on a film called Bone, and it was in an auto wrecking yard, and he wanted people in the cars that had died in the accident, so I did wounds and stuff on that. So he had my phone number, and actually that happened because when I did Schlock, which was my second film, John Landis' first film, Larry was editing a movie in an editing bay next to Schlock, and he saw the makeup, and he goes, "Oh, who's that guy? I need a makeup artist." So anyways, I was working on The Exorcist with Dick Smith, who was my idol, and there was a phone call, and he said, "It's for you, Rick." And I go, "For me? Who knows? I knew I was here, you know." And apparently he called my house, and my parents gave him the number. And he said, "You know, I'm doing a movie about a baby who kills everybody in the delivery room and then terrorizes Los Angeles, you know." And he goes, "I want you to build a baby." He says, and I said, "You know, a baby?" You know, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do this, you know. And he goes, "Well, I'm never really going to show it. I just want something for the actors to have, you know." And he goes, "But maybe, you know, maybe you could build a suit for a cat." And I said, "Is this a human baby?" And he said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I don't think a cat in a human baby suit's going to work, you know." And then he said, "How about a chicken?" And then he goes, no, maybe two chickens, you know." And he goes, "You know, they might fight each other. We could get some good stuff, you know." And I said, "Well, you know, I'm going to be finished here in a couple of weeks. You know, why don't we like revisit this when you're not so high, you know?" And, so he said, yeah, I'm never going to build it. So we decided upon. I said I was just going to make a dummy baby that had like a wire armature that we could kind of reposition, you know. And he films all his movies in his house. And so he was already in production filming the normal people talking, and I had 2 weeks to build this baby in my bedroom at my parents' house. And if any of you, there's a picture of this baby that's in one of the work tables in my bedroom that I took. It's one that shows up online a lot. But I called him up and I said, "I got the baby done. Can I bring it and just put it in front of the camera and look at it?" And he said, "There's no reason for you to do that because I'm never going to show it." You know, and it's like, humor me, Larry. You know, here I made this baby for nothing basically, and I just wanted to see what it looks like in a film. So I brought it to his house, just the baby, and he goes, "This is great. I love this." He goes, "Let's shoot a scene. Let's have her crawl along the ground and climb up on Shannon Farrell's lap and like, you know, cuddle with her." And I go, "You said you're never going to show it. It doesn't do anything, you know." And he goes, "Well, I don't care. I want to do that, you know." And I didn't even have any tools with me, you know. And I said, "Well, do you maybe have a wrench and a clothes hanger or something, you know, wire clothes hanger?" So I tried to rig something and just said, "This isn't going to work, you know." I said, "How about this? How about I make a suit for a person, a partial suit, and we could just film them in like black, you know, like sitting on a stool, you know, growling, and you could do, you know, the mouth would move and stuff." So again, he goes, "I need it immediately." So I had no time. So I talked my girlfriend at the time into I needed somebody to do it on. I said, how would you like to be in a movie? You know, and so I took a cast of her, made this big baby head that had, you know, big eyes that she couldn't see out of, which I didn't think was going to be a problem because I just thought she was going to sit still, you know. And I only built a suit like down to here, and I had some hands that didn't even have elbows on it, you know. And the same thing happens, you know, we show up with this, instead of putting her in a chair in black, he's going, "Okay, have her crawl along here and then climb up on this." And I go, you know, it's, so she had to like crawl on her stomach and kind of hide her elbows on her thing, you know, and then it's like, you know, I got this big fiberglass giant, you know, Paul Bunyan guy from a tire store, you know, and I want her to climb up on top of the ladder and bite him on the neck, you know. And she's going, I'm kind of scared, you know, because she couldn't see, you know. And the teeth I made for her were just made out of dental wax. And also the baby was supposed to get shot. And so they were going to put a squib in her head. And she was very nervous about this. And I said, you know, squibs, you won't even know it goes off, you know. But the effects guy, whose name was Crazy Harry, who I'd worked with, he was also on the Octamen. He was the low budget, you know, effects guy. He deserved the name. But he kind of did the math. You know, he says, well, if the baby's head is actually that big, and now this head is this big, I'll put a big-ass charge in her head, you know. So my girlfriend's up on top of the ladder, scared to death, and Larry comes and goes, bite him on the neck, bite him on the neck, and I'm going, don't break the teeth, don't break the teeth, you know, and then the bomb goes off in her head, you know. Huge explosion, and it scared the shit out of her, and me, actually, you know. And, you know, it just got worse from there. You know?
You mentioned Dick Smith before. How did you meet him? And what was the most important lesson you learned from him?
Well, in the second book I found in a library, which they had to send from another library to my local library in Cupertino. It was called The Technique of Film and Television Makeup, and Dick Smith started the NBC makeup department. He worked mainly on television in those days. And he did a number of makeups that I thought were great. But anyways, I was looking through this book, and there were makeups that were just so much better than anybody else's. And it's like, Dick Smith, you know. Here's another cool one, Dick Smith, Dick Smith. I should have worn socks, you know. But it's hot. So I became a hardcore Dick Smith fan. And one of the projects I had in school, we had to look up people in Who's Who in America. And I looked up Boris Karloff, and we had to write an article. Boris Karloff, Vincent Price panel, I go and see, and I thought, I'll look up Dick Smith. And he was in there, and his address was in there. So I wrote his address down, and to me it was like the address of God, you know. And I saved it. I was too shy. I was a painfully shy kid. I was too shy to write it. To me, it was like writing a letter to God. But I had this old cigar box that I kept my valuables in, and a little piece of paper with Dick's address. Like I said, I was born in New York, and my grandmother lived there, who I had never met, and she was at the end of her life. And when I graduated from high school, my parents said, we want you to go to New York to meet your grandmother before she passes. And it's like, it's summer vacation. I can make masks all summer. I don't care about meeting this old lady, you know. And then it was like, New York, wait a minute, you know. And then like, Dick Smith lived in New York. I was in California, you know. So I wrote him a letter. I said, it's now or never. I got on his thing. I wrote a misspelled, a terrible speller. And again, like I said, I'm so lucked out that my career path worked out. You know, I wrote him a letter, and I sent some photos. Many of them were copies of makeups that Dick Smith had done, and one of them was this Quasimodo makeup that I made a mask of, and I also had an oil painting that I did of that. And I said, I'm going to be in New York. I would love to meet you. I got an almost instant reply. This was back when you mail stuff, you know. I went to the mailbox every day, you know. And one day I opened the mailbox, and it was a letter addressed to me with Dick Smith's address, and it was spongy. And I just had to take a few moments just looking at it. And I opened it up, and in there was a foam rubber casting of this Quasimodo makeup that he did. And also a photograph of this 120-year-old man makeup that he was doing on Dustin Hoffman for a film called Little Big Man. And this incredible letter that just said, I can't wait to meet you. I've never seen work like this from anybody, let alone an 18-year-old self-taught kid. And we landed in New York City, and he lived near New York City, so at the very beginning of the trip, my parents drove me to his house, and I thought I was going to maybe spend a half an hour with Dick Smith. And Dick Smith sent my parents away, and he said, I want to spend the day with Rick. And he gave me a yellow legal notepad and a pen, and he goes, if you have any questions, I'm going to answer anything you want, and I think you should write it down so you don't forget, you know. I said, okay, you know, and I spent the entire day and well into the night with Dick, answered any question I had, you know, gave me formulas for things. It was just such an incredible day, you know. And he was such a generous man, because Dick was also self-taught, and when he started at NBC, he had actually never even really done much makeup, and he called some of the Hollywood makeup artists, and everything was a trade secret, They would take spirit gum bottles, which was an adhesive that's basically like tree sap, and they would take the label off and write special secret adhesive, So they didn't tell Dick Smith anything, and he actually developed a better technique than what they were doing on his own. And he felt if anybody asked him how to do stuff, he was going to go out of his way. He would actually send, there was what used to be called a mimeograph machine, kind of like a Xerox machine. Anytime he did a film, he knew somebody would say, how did you do this? So he did complete instructions. This is what I did, this is how I did it, this is where I got the materials, this is what I would do again if I did it the next time, And he was, because of Dick, the whole state-of-the-art of makeup advanced so far, It inspired so many people, shared the knowledge, and I wanted to do the same.